Here's the watercolour painting that I've been fiddling with a little bit more since the end of the video that deals mostly with this painting. So I shall use the painting as reference mostly, but also having a look at the photograph that I took today, where in a week the leaves have come out so much more. They're creating more shadow, more drama. I took that this morning just before I started videoing, and I also took a photograph just of the sky. Incredible rich colour, because I'm going to paint in a very different way with the acrylic paint and paint all the sky first. So the paper will have sky, and then the tree I can paint on top of the sky. It'll show you the difference between acrylic painting and watercolour painting quite clearly. I'm just getting a bit of water out into the palette so that I can mix my white to a slightly thinner consistency. Just makes it feed onto the brush more easily. There, it's nice and creamy. Tiny little dot of phthalo-cyanine blue going into there. What a powerful colour that is. To blend it in quite thoroughly so it is not streaky. And that's that quite long bristled flat brush, which is good for covering larger areas like this. You can see the brush marks I'm putting down are quite short and going in different directions. I'm not going to aim for a very smooth graduation of blues, because most of the blue is going to be covered up by the leaves of the tree. But I don't want it to be streaky, and I do find that the longer the brush stroke you make, the more streaky the effect is. Which is why you can see me putting it on in this more kind of choppy way. Paint is drying so fast, you can't really blend it wet into wet. As soon as I've put a patch down, the previous patch is dry. I've speeded up the video because there's quite a lot of paint mixing and paint applying until we get across to the other side of the page. What I'm doing is just adding more phthalo-cyanine blue to the mixture to make it darker. It goes over towards the left hand side. I need to mix a slightly bigger quantity because I know I've got a fair amount of the paper still to cover. I also put a little bit of that dioxazine purple in now. On the left hand side of the sky I can see more warmer purpley tones of colour. So it's gone from a light, slightly greenish blue on the right hand side, over towards the left, a more purpley, warm, darker blue. Something else you can see happening is how the colour is going darker as it dries. It's quite interesting to see that as this part of the video is speeded up. You can really see the paint drying and how much darker it goes when it's dry compared to when it was wet. So that's the first pass, and then what I do is I go back from left to right, just adding more blue to the mixture because I felt it was perhaps going slightly too purpley. Going back in, trying to blend over those bands of colour. Adding more white now as I'm working towards the right, wanting that colour to go lighter. There is still more of the purple in it here than there was when I did the first pass from right to left. So I'm going back in with some blue, lightening it up, and all this is judgment down to experience, I suppose. This is quite a challenging exercise to do, but as we're doing it for the tree to go on top of, it doesn't really matter too much about getting it very, very even. Sky done. Now it just has to dry. So it's quite shiny still on that left hand side. Just got to put it down, let it dry for a while. So I put some of that paint down in my sketchbook so that I could test the colours that I want to mix next for the sky, for the tree. So this is lemon yellow. Now I know that lemon yellow is quite a translucent colour, so let's just have a look how the lemon yellow looks by itself on top of that dark blue. First of all, put a little tiny touch of phthalocyanine blue into it, which again is a translucent colour. So both of these translucent colours are going to, it's going to be difficult to cover up the blue with those colours. On top of the white paper it looks like a nice bright colour. As soon as you see it on top of the blue, you can see how translucent it is. So what's the answer? Let's blend it into some white. See if that makes it opaque enough to cover up the blue. Still a nice limey, predominantly yellow green. And clearly that white has made it thicker and stronger and more opaque. So I'll take a great big dollop of white over there, blend my yellow and white together so that I know all that pale green that I'm going to make will be opaque enough to cover the sky. I'm using that large size round brush because to begin a painting I usually make large marks first, fill in the main areas of colour called blocking in, and then switch over to a smaller brush to put smaller marks and finer detail in. Every now and then I also add a little tiny bit of water to the paint. It does sometimes thickens up a little bit, even though it's on a stay wet surface in the palette. It still does thicken up slightly, and it starts to get a bit cloggy on the brush. Switching to the smaller brush now, smaller round brush. I'm ready to put in some more detailed marks. One of the things you can do if you find yourself making marks that are a bit repetitive and a bit similar, you want to try and vary the marks, is just to vary the angle that the brush comes in to the paper at. I'm ready to test the darker colour now, the darker green colour for the shadowy part of the leaves. So I've got that burnt sienna that I squeezed out of the old tube, and I really think it's time I ordered some new burnt sienna, because that paint has gone so thick and horrible. It's taking quite a lot of working to get rid of the lumps and blend in with the phthalocyanine blue. So I'm looking for a really nice rich dark green. Quite surprising that blue and brown can make bright green. And there you go, that's the power of the phthalocyanine blue. Very greeny blue, very strong and greeny blue, and it looks maybe too dark, almost black, so putting some white in it, I can see what colour I've got. Looks rather bluish still. Let's try that now. Let's hope I've made enough of it. I'm back in with the thicker brush again, because I want to block in some of these larger shadowy areas. And I added a little bit of the light yellowy green to it as well. And time passed and I'd done all that. Mixing a sort of medium shade of green now, between that very pale green and the darkest green. I've got a third tone going on there. You can see how I'm able to switch between light paint, dark paint. I'm going back in with a lighter colour now. This mixture is going to be for the branches and the twigs. So it's burnt sienna and dioxazine purple, which will make a cool greyish brown, hopefully. test it out and see what I've got. Wow, that's so dark. Looks like black, but when you see the painting in real life, you can see that it's not black. It's kind of like a warm charcoal colour. So to begin with, to paint the thicker parts of the boughs and the large branches, I've got that short, thicker round brush. Sorry, the thinner of the two round brushes, but I've not picked up the thin rigger brush yet. Look at that, experiment and play. Of course, if you're working from a photograph, the temptation is to be exact and try and follow the branches exactly as they are. But what I'm trying to do is to just paint the character of those branches and more or less where they are without following every exact twist and turn. Here's the rigger. Here's that lovely rigger brush. The long, long bristles. I've made the paint thin enough to flow nicely off the rigger brush, going along one of the marks I've made previously and then just extending it and again twisting. Did you see that little twist it gets? So I was watching the tip of the brush, watch my hand. There you are, twist. And twists and turns both ways. I think I decided that the colour was really too dark to carry on with. I wanted to paint some branches that look as if they're a bit further away in the tree. So I've added a little bit of white to the mixture there, which I can then see that the colour is really quite purple. So I'm trying to neutralise the purple by adding some of the opposite colour. And the opposite colour to purple is yellow. So if you've got a purple that's too vivid purple, you add a bit of yellow to it, it makes it less purple. Likewise, if you had yellow that was too bright and you wanted to make it slightly softer and more grey, you would add purple to it. You can see most of the blue sky is covered up now, but you can see the graduation of colour from the right to the left, from the slightly more turquoisey blue through to the purpley blue. I'm actually sort of looking up into the tree, facing more or less north. So the left-hand side of the picture is west and the right side of the picture is east. It's quite interesting to look at the change in colour in the sky as it goes from one side to the other, how it varies from morning to afternoon. That's probably enough for this study. That's all the brushes I've used. And quick swill out in the water, but you can still see how much paint there is left on there. I'm going to need a much better brush washing session later on in the kitchen. And there they all are. A flat, 2 rounds and a rigger. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. If you like to follow the video and try one of your own, or even take your own photograph and do a painting of your own subject, looking up into the sky through a tree.